But yesterday there was this political earthquake. Eric Cantor being beat by Tea Party professor Dave Brat, who had been given a $500,000 fellowship by this banker, who is now the chairman of the Cato Institute, to teach Ayn Rand principles at the university where he's a professor, and then being heavily supported by Laura Ingraham and Mark Levin. Mark Levin, who got, according to Politico, got over $700,000 from the Coke machine, and Laura Ingraham, we don't know the numbers, but we know that the Coke machine had donated a lot of money, $22 million in total, from various right-wing groups, went to these talk show hosts via their shows and other fancy this, that, and the other thing. And I was positing yesterday that was a large part of why they won, why he won. Lee Fong pointed out something else that I think is really, really worth knowing about and discussing. And in a great piece posted over at, Lee, I'm sorry, remind me of the website.
RepublicReport.org.
RepublicReport.org. I'm holding the page in my hand, but this printer is not set up to print the byline on it. I wanted to make sure. Anyhow, Lee Fong is with us, co-founder of Republic Report, author of The Machine, a field guide to the resurgent right, the website RepublicReport.org. And the headline is Eric Cantor's opponent beat him by calling out GOP corruption. You note that Eric Cantor's PAC spent $168,000 on steakhouses, $116,000 on luxury hotels, nearly $250,000 on airfare, $17,000 just to the Beverly Hills Hotel in just the last year and a half during this campaign, and that his wife works for the Wall Street banks. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right. And $75,000 on a pollster who told him that he would win by 30 points.
Right. And Dave Brat kept pointing these things out, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Dave Brat is an interesting fellow, and I really appreciated your piece yesterday pointing out some of these ties to the big money libertarian movement that Dave Brat has, because it's an interesting perspective. And, you know, truth be told, like pretty much anyone else who follows these types of things, I was not reporting on this race. I did not know about Dave Brat before this week. But as soon as that victory was announced Tuesday night, I spent almost 4 hours just sitting by my computer listening to Dave Brat, listening to his radio interviews, listening to his town halls, his speeches, the different interviews he's given to local media. He's certainly a Randian, a libertarian. You know, he's an economist. That being said, he ran a very unorthodox campaign against Cantor. You know, I follow a lot of Tea Party candidates, and you know, a lot of these Tea Party folks, they'll attack Washington in a general sense, but what Brat did was run on a very specific campaign of calling out corruption, calling out lobbyists by name, and saying that Wall Street and K Street are ruining the country, and that Eric Cantor is the embodiment of that problem because he's been so close to the big banks, so close to the big lobbyists. And really, if you listen to him, parts of his campaign sounded like they were stripped out of the playbook of Elizabeth Warren or Occupy Wall Street.
In other words, they were very populist, very grassroots.
Yeah.
So, you know, you listened to 4 hours of his speeches, and you developed this narrative as this was his campaign narrative, and I mean, you're one of the best reporters out there. How is it that the mainstream media is saying that he won by beating up Eric Cantor on immigration? Is this lazy reporting, or is it that the mainstream media is, you know, their boards of directors are interlocked with the major banks, and they're part of the establishment, as it were, and so they don't want to report that a populist who's basically beating up on the machine is the guy who won?
Well, look, Dave Brat did call out immigration, and he did use, I think, a lot of, dog whistles that I think are fairly, you know, I would argue racist in the sense that he was saying that, you know, all these immigrants are coming in to take your jobs, they're going to lower our wages. But that's, you know, this is it's an ugly part, but it's been a part of American populism for a very long time. That being said, you listen to his speeches, the majority of the time he's talking about economic populism, not this kind of nativism, immigration populism. Yes, immigration was a small part. The way that the mainstream media, the corporate media, has said that he was only an immigration candidate, that's simply not true. I listened to his speeches.
So why are they saying that?
Look, I think it's mostly just laziness. I think a lot of folks said, "Oh, here's a guy that was, that mentioned immigration in a couple of his, on his website. So this must be an immigration candidate," and they lumped him in with all of these other kind of Tea Party right-wing challengers that are single-issue immigration types. But they simply didn't actually listen to the man speak. Because if you listen to his speeches, he spends over 50% of the time just talking about economic populism, about the role of lobbyists and banks in our politics. That's his obsession. You listen to some of his speeches, and he doesn't even mention immigration.
That's fascinating. Now, let me ask you about, yesterday the New York Times was speculating that anti-Semitism played a role in this because Cantor was the only Jewish member of the Republican side of the House of Representatives. And I can tell you there's no shortage of people who call into this radio program and want to go off on the the international banker conspiracy, or even the American banker conspiracy. And if you let them talk long enough, they get to the word that they have left out, which is the Jewish banker conspiracy. And in many cases, when people who are fundamentalist Christians, as Dave Brat is, and are waving that flag loudly and proudly, as he certainly did on Fox News on the night of the election, I watched it. When they're talking about bankers, that's code whistle for Jews.
Right.
You listened to his speeches. Did you get a sense that he was doing that dog whistle anti-Semitism, or was this just genuine kind of more Elizabeth Warren kind of stuff, and the Democrats should be taking a lesson from this?
I did not take what the New York Times, or what the New York Times quoted people as saying that this was a kind of stealth anti-Semitic race, because, look, that what you're talking about is a big problem in American politics. There is anti-Semitism. It exists. It needs to be called out. It needs to be crushed. But, truth be told, I wasn't in Virginia. I wasn't covering the race day to day. But from what I've heard, I didn't see anything that looked to me like anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Well, nobody's calling Elizabeth Warren anti-Semitic because she's calling out the banksters. I mean,
exactly.
there's a way to do it that is dog whistle, and there's a way to do it that's just pointing out bankers.
Well, look, Dave Brat, he does talk about his Christian faith, but I think he did it in a fairly respectful, non-kind of dog whistle way.
So he wasn't talking about like banker cabals and stuff like this.
No.
And that's one of the phrases that they always use.
Never using that type of terminology. And look, he was talking about how he did say, look, we have a Judeo-Christian culture coming from our founding fathers. But then he would start talking about how he loved how several of the founding fathers had learned Hebrew, and that had motivated some of the founding documents.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was not something he obsessed over.
So this was a populist victory in your mind, Lee Fong.
Absolutely, and I
fascinating. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You got to read this story. It's amazing. Read it over at republicreport.org. Lee Fong, co-founder of Republic Report, author of The Machine, A Field Guide to the Resurgent Right. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.